The Korean Mafia boss didn't fall in love when I spoke his language. He fell when I made his mother cry. I was just a waitress trying to be polite, bowing deep, using the formal speech I'd practiced for months. But when she tasted my kimchi and grabbed my hand like I was a ghost from her past, everything changed. He came back alone 3 days later, sat in the dark corner, watched me for 2 hours. Then he slid a folder across the table with $15,000 inside and said, "My mother's 60th birthday is in 6 weeks. I need you to save her life." I should have said no. Should have walked away from the man whose hands I'd later watch break bones as easily as they folded dumplings. But I looked at that check and thought about my student loans, my research dreams, my one-way ticket to Korea I couldn't afford. So I took the money, and by the time I realized what I'd actually agreed to, it was too late to leave. Before we start, where are you watching from tonight? If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. It started with 7 words I wasn't supposed to say. "어머니, 국물이 입맛에 맞으십니까? 이요미요니, is the broth to your liking?" The formal Korean came out before I could stop it, the kind of high-register speech you use with elders you deeply respect. The kind that requires a bow from the waist, which my body was already doing before my brain caught up. I didn't plan to speak Korean. Not here at the Glass Lotus, where the servers were trained to be invisible and efficient, where the fusion menu made my culinary professors weep, and the clientele paid more for ambiance than authenticity. But I'd been watching her for 20 minutes from across the dining room, and something about this woman shattered me. She sat like royalty in black silk and pearls, silver hair twisted in an elegant French knot. But her eyes were dead, hollow in a way that transcended language. She'd barely touched her miso-glazed butterfish, had pushed the deconstructed kimchi around her plate with the kind of quiet contempt reserved for food that had forgotten where it came from. I knew that look. I had worn it myself in too many American Korean restaurants that served innovation when all I craved was memory. So, when I approached their table, the Korean just escaped. Her menu clattered against her wineglass. Her hand flew to the pearls at her throat, and her eyes, those sad, distant eyes, suddenly blazed with something I couldn't name. Shock, recognition, desperate hope. "당신이 한국말을 하세요?" Her voice cracked. You speak Korean?" "네, 어머니." I bowed deeper. "Yes, ma'am. 제가 한국 요리를 전공하고 있어서 언어를 배우고 있습니다. I'm studying Korean cuisine, so I'm learning the language." But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at him. The man across from her had gone completely still. Not surprised still, predator still. He wore a black turtleneck that probably cost more than my rent, and his face was all controlled danger and sharp angles. In the reservation notes, I'd seen his name. Min Jae Kang, Table 12, 7 p.m., every Sunday for 3 years. In person, he was terrifying, and he was staring at me like I'd just performed a miracle he'd stopped believing in. His hand had frozen halfway to his water glass. The other had curled into a fist on the white tablecloth. Every line of his body radiated intensity, the kind of focused attention that made my pulse skip and my survival instincts scream, "Run." But the older woman, Sun Jae, according to the reservation, reached out suddenly, her fingers wrapping around my wrist with surprising strength. "어디서 배웠어요? Where did you learn?" Her voice was raw. "당신 부모님이 한국 분이세요? Are your parents Korean?" The man's jaw tightened. "엄마, Mom." The single word was a warning, low and controlled. I didn't pull away. I looked at Sunjae and saw my own face reflected back the face of someone far from home. "아니요. No. 저는 입양아예요. 하지만 한국 음식이 저를 집으로 데려다 주는 것 같아요. I'm adopted. But Korean food feels like it brings me home." Something shifted in the air between us. The temperature of the entire conversation changed. Sunjae's eyes filled with tears. Min-jae uncurled his fist slowly, and when he looked at me again, the danger was still there, but underneath it was something vulnerable and aching. "The kimchi," Sunjae said suddenly in English, her accent thick. "It is too." She waved her hand, searching. "Shioyo?" I offered gently. "Sour? Too fermented?" She nodded eagerly, switching back to Korean. "전라도식 김치가 그리워요. 어릴 적에 먹던 그 맛." I miss Jeollado-style kimchi. The kind I ate when I was young. My face split into a genuine smile, the first real one of my shift. 제가 직접 담근 김치가 주방에 있어요. I have kimchi. I made myself in the back. 이번 주에 남갔는데 전라도 스타일로 만들었어요. 애깨져하고 생새우를 넣어서. I made it this week, 전라도 style, with fish sauce and raw shrimp. I didn't finish, because Min Jae finally spoke, and his voice was dark honey and smoke. 당신 이름이 뭐예요? What's your name? I looked at him fully for the first time. Up close, he was devastating, not handsome in a conventional way, but magnetic. The kind of dangerous that your mother warns you about, if your mother had been around to warn you. Juliet, I said, then added in Korean. Juliet Jones입니다. Juliet Jones. His eyes held mine, and I saw something flicker in their depths, something that made my stomach flip and my hands tremble. Juliet C. He used the respectful honorific, making my name sound like poetry. 제 어머니께 김치 좀 가져다 주시겠어요? Would you bring my mother some of your kimchi? It wasn't a request. It was a test. I bowed again. 물론이죠. 영광입니다. Of course. It would be an honor. As I walked toward the kitchen, I felt his eyes tracking me across the dining room, hunting me, like I was prey, or maybe something far more dangerous, something worth keeping. I brought out the jar of kimchi I'd fermented in my tiny apartment, the batch I'd made following a recipe from a grandmother in Jeonju I'd found on YouTube, the one I'd practiced 17 times until the funk and the heat and the sweetness balanced perfectly. Sunjae took one bite and closed her eyes. Then she started to cry. Not polite tears. Deep, shaking sobs that made other diners turn and stare. She covered her mouth with her napkin, but her shoulders shook with the force of memory breaking through. Min Jae moved instantly, his hand on her shoulder, his voice low and urgent in Korean. 엄마, 괜찮아요? Mom, are you okay? 고향 맛이야, she whispered. It tastes like home. She pulled me down into an embrace that smelled like jasmine and grief. 고마워요, 고마워요. Thank you, thank you. When I finally pulled back, Min Jae was watching us both with an expression I'd never seen on a man's face before. Wonder, longing, something raw and undefended. And 20 minutes later, when Sunjae tasted my kimchi and started crying into her napkin while her son watched with the first genuine smile I'd seen on his face all night, I realized something terrifying. I'd stolen his mother's heart too, and in Min Jae's world, that was worth far more than any territory or empire. He came back alone on Tuesday. I was in the middle of explaining the difference between gochugaru and regular chili flakes to a confused line cook when I felt that prickling awareness that meant someone was watching me. I looked up from the spice containers and froze. Min Jae sat in the corner booth, the one we called Siberia because nobody ever requested it. Too dark, too isolated, positioned where you could see the entire dining room but remain virtually invisible yourself. He'd chosen it deliberately. He wore black again, a different turtleneck. Same dangerous elegance, and he wasn't looking at a menu. He was looking at me, had probably been looking at me since he walked in 20 minutes ago, and I'd been too focused on my prep work to notice. My hands went still on the spice jars. You gonna tell me why the scary hot guy keeps staring at you? Marcus, our head waiter, appeared at my elbow. Because I'm getting serious stalker vibes, and I'm already planning which knife I'm grabbing from the kitchen. It's not like that, I said. But my voice sounded uncertain even to my own ears. Then what's it like? I didn't have an answer. I'd thought about Sunday's dinner exactly 400 times since it happened. The way Sunjae had cried over my kimchi. The way Min Jae had insisted on paying for the entire jar I'd brought from the back, tipping me $300 for a $20 container of fermented vegetables. The way he'd written his phone number on the receipt with a single word in Korean. 고맙습니다. Thank you. I hadn't called, hadn't texted, had convinced myself it was a one-time thing. A moment of connection that meant everything to a homesick woman and nothing to her terrifying son. Apparently, I'd been wrong. Table 12. Chef Andre's voice crackled through my earpiece. He's requested you specifically. Marcus raised his eyebrows. Scary and specific. My favorite combination. I untied my apron and smoothed down my hair, suddenly aware that I smelled like garlic and gochujang. My hands were stained red from the chili paste I'd been testing. I looked like exactly what I was, a culinary student working 3 jobs to pay for a degree in a cuisine that wasn't even mine by blood. Min Jae didn't look away as I approached. His gaze tracked every step, and I felt naked under that attention. Examined. Assessed. Mr. Ferrante didn't tell me you needed a reservation, I said in English, falling back on professional distance. Min Jae. His voice was quiet, controlled. And I don't. He slid a folder across the table. Expensive leather, the kind that probably cost more than my textbooks. I need you to read this, he said. And then I need you to tell me if you can do what I think you can do. I looked at the folder. Looked at him. What is it? His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something desperate beneath all that control. My mother's 60th birthday is in 6 weeks, he said, and I need you to save her life. The folder sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. I circled it like it was a bomb. Made coffee around it, ate cereal while staring at it. Told myself I should return it unopened, because nothing good came from men who sat in dark corners and talked about saving lives through birthday dinners. But curiosity was a living thing with claws, and on Thursday night, I finally gave in. Inside was a check for $15,000. I actually gasped out loud in my empty apartment. Beneath it was a handwritten letter in surprisingly elegant script, half English, half Korean. A menu proposal for a traditional Hwangap feast, 60 dishes representing 60 years of life. Royal court cuisine, the kind served to Joseon dynasty kings. The kind that took days to prepare and required techniques most modern chefs had forgotten. The kind I'd written my entire thesis proposal about. How did you? I whispered to the empty room, but I already knew. He'd researched me, thoroughly. Probably knew my class schedule, my GPA, my thesis advisor's name. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it made my pulse race for entirely different reasons. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Have you read it? My hands shook as I typed back. How did you know about my thesis? 3 dots appeared immediately, like he'd been waiting by his phone. I know everything about you. Juliet Jones. Born March 15th. Adopted at 6 months through Holt International. Graduated top of your class at Cambridge Culinary. Currently working 4 jobs to fund research that no one else cares about. I should have been furious. Should have blocked his number and returned the check. Instead, I wrote, 3 jobs, not 4. The bakery shift you pick up on Saturdays counts. Jesus, I breathed. The money is a deposit. You'll get another $15,000 when it's done. Plus expenses. $30,000. That was 8 months of rent. 2 semesters of tuition. A plane ticket to Korea to study with the fermentation masters in Jeonju. It was everything I needed and couldn't afford. Why me? I typed. The response took longer this time. Because you made my mother smile for the first time in 3 years. Because you spoke to her like she mattered. Because you understand that food isn't just sustenance, it's memory. I stared at those words until they blurred. And because, he added, you're the only person in this city who makes kimchi the way she remembers. I picked up the check, held it to the light like it might be counterfeit. But the paper was real. The signature bold and confident across the bottom. Min J. Kang. I took a photo of it and sent it to my roommate with the caption, "Is this insane?" She responded immediately. That's either a fairy tale or a horror movie. Either way, I'm getting popcorn. I looked at my phone. At the check. At the folder with its impossible menu and careful notes about Sunjay's favorite childhood dishes. Then I did the most reckless thing I'd ever done in my careful, planned-out life. When do we start? The address he gave me was in Tribeca, the kind of building where doormen wore actual uniforms, and the lobby had original artwork worth more than my student loans. Miss Jones, the concierge said before I could introduce myself. Mr. Kang is expecting you. Penthouse level. Of course he was. The elevator was glass and chrome, and I watched the city drop away beneath my feet as I rose 47 floors. I'd worn my nicest jeans and a clean white button-down, had tied my hair back professionally, had told myself this was just a consulting job, a business arrangement. Then the elevator opened directly into his apartment, and every professional thought evaporated. The space was enormous, and almost aggressively minimalist. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan like Min Jae owned it, which, based on the research I'd stupidly done at 2 a.m., he basically did. Everything was black, white, or gray, sharp edges and cold surfaces, except for the kitchen. The kitchen was a chef's fever dream, Le Cornway range in navy blue, marble countertops that stretched for miles, every knife, pot, and tool you could imagine, most still in their original packaging. And in the center of it all, looking completely out of place in his black suit, was Min Jae. You don't cook, I said, taking in the unused equipment. No. He gestured to the space. But you will. I set down my bag of ingredients and sample recipes. This isn't how consulting usually works. I don't want a consultant. I want you here, cooking with me, teaching me what my mother needs to feel. He moved closer, and I fought the urge to step back. 6 weeks isn't long enough to learn 60 dishes, but it's long enough to learn why they matter. You want to help cook your own mother's birthday feast? Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that controlled facade. I want to give her something made with my own hands. Not just my money. The vulnerability in those words made my chest tight. Okay, I heard myself say. But we start simple. I pulled out the ingredients I'd brought. Flour, ground pork, kimchi, garlic, ginger, mandu, dumplings. If you can't fold these, you can't fold anything else. Min-jae removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves. I tried not to stare at his forearms, tried not to notice the scars there, the faded marks that suggested a history of violence. Show me, he said. I demonstrated the fold, pinch, pleat, seal. My hands moved automatically through the motions I'd practiced 1,000 times. Then I handed him a wrapper and watched his large, elegant, dangerous hands struggle with the delicate dough. He destroyed 6 wrappers before he got one to hold together. This is harder than it looks, he muttered in Korean. Everything worth doing is. I moved beside him, my hand covering his, guiding his fingers through the pleating motion. You have to be gentle, patient. His hand went still under mine. Our faces were inches apart. Patient, he repeated softly, is not something I'm known for. Behind us, I heard a quiet gasp. Sun-jae stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. 6 weeks passed like a fever dream. 3 nights a week, I stood in Min-jae's kitchen teaching him dishes his mother had abandoned hope of ever tasting again. Japchae with hand-cut sweet potato noodles, galbi-jjim braised until the short ribs fell off the bone, jeon delicate pancakes made from everything, kimchi, zucchini, seafood. Sun-jae materialized during every session, sitting at the counter like we were her personal cooking show. She'd correct my pronunciation, laugh when Min-jae burned the garlic, tell stories about her childhood in jeollado that made the food taste like memory. I watched Min-jae transform in those moments. The cold, dangerous man from the restaurant became someone softer, someone who listened when his mother talked, someone whose eyes found mine across the counter when she wasn't looking, holding my gaze a heartbeat too long, someone I was definitely, catastrophically falling for. You're playing with fire, Marcus warned me during a shift at the Glass Lotus. That man has bodyguards, Jules. Bodyguards don't follow around accountants. I knew. God, I knew. I'd seen the men in dark suits who stood outside the building, heard the phone calls Min-jae took in rapid Korean, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that made my survival instincts scream. But I'd also seen him carefully arrange perilla leaves on a plate for his mother. Watched him practice his knife cuts until 2 a.m. because he wanted the radish matchsticks perfect. Felt his hand steady mine when I reached for a hot pan, his touch lingering longer than necessary. 1 more week, I told Marcus. Then it's done. The night of the Hwangap, Min-jae rented out the entire top floor of Nonas, the real Italian place. Ironically, because it had the warmth that the Glass Lotus lacked. We'd spent 2 days cooking, and the private dining room looked like something from a Joseon palace painting. Sun-jae arrived in a custom hanbok, midnight blue silk embroidered with silver cranes. She looked 20 years younger, her eyes bright with anticipation. I'd worn one too, a modern version in deep burgundy that Min-jae had sent to my apartment with a note. For tonight. For her. M. When Sun-jae saw the table, she covered her mouth and wept. 60 dishes, each one a memory, each one made with hands that loved her. Omani, Min-jae said, standing to give a toast. His voice was rough with emotion. 60 years. You carried our family through everything. Tonight we carry you. He raised his glass, but his eyes were on me. Sun-jae pulled me into an embrace that smelled like jasmine and tears. Gomawayo, she whispered against my hair. Thank you. You gave me my son back. I was about to respond when I heard it a crash from the hallway, shouting in Korean. Min-jae's entire body went rigid. His hand moved to his jacket. Stay with her, he ordered me, his voice suddenly cold. Dead. Then he was gone, moving toward the door with frightening speed. And through the window, I saw 3 men with guns. Everything happened in seconds. Min-jae didn't run toward the danger, he became it. One moment he was the man who'd struggled to fold dumplings. The next, he was a weapon in a suit. I pulled Sun-jae behind the table as the door burst open. 3 men, not in uniforms but in street clothes that screamed intent. They were shouting in Korean something about territory, about disrespect, about teaching lessons. Min-jae answered in the same language, but his voice was arctic. Then his fist connected with the first man's jaw, with a crack that made me flinch. Don't watch, Sun-jae said, pressing my face to her shoulder. But I couldn't look away. This wasn't a fight. It was an execution choreographed to precision. Min-jae moved like violence was a second language, every strike calculated and brutal. He broke the first man's wrist with a twist that made me taste bile, drove the second into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. The third pulled a gun. Time crystallized. I saw Min-jae's eyes go flat and empty, saw something inhuman slide behind his face. He closed the distance before the man could fire, redirecting the gun and delivering a strike to the throat that dropped him instantly. Then there was blood. On the floor, on his hands, on the white shirt he'd worn to his mother's birthday. The silence after was worse than the violence. Min-jae stood over the bodies unconscious, I told myself. They're just unconscious, his chest heaving. When he turned to look at us, I saw the monster everyone else saw, the thing he'd kept hidden during dumpling lessons and late-night cooking sessions. Juliet. His voice cracked on my name. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my hanbok. Sunjae's grip tightened on my arm. I couldn't finish the sentence. Need to leave. Need to breathe. Need to unsee what I just saw. Men in suits flooded in his people, cleaning crew, making the violence disappear like it had never happened. Min-jae gave orders in clipped Korean, still dripping blood on his mother's birthday feast. Take her home, he said to one of them, not looking at me. Make sure she's safe. Min-jae, Sunjae started. Not now, Amma. His voice was hollow. Please. A driver appeared at my elbow, gentle but insistent. I let him guide me to the elevator, my legs moving on autopilot. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was Min-jae standing alone among the ruins of the dinner we'd built together, his mother reaching for him, and him stepping back like he didn't deserve her touch, like he didn't deserve anything good. The drive home was a blur. I stumbled into my apartment, locked the door, and slid down against it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Grant approved. Full funding. Seoul National University Fermentation Lab. Departure. 2 weeks. The research opportunity I'd applied for 6 months ago. The dream I'd convinced myself would never happen. It was finally mine, and all I could see was blood on white marble. I saw the monster everyone warned me about. Blood on marble, violence in his eyes, and I ran. But here's the truth that haunts me. I wasn't running from what he did. I was running from how easily I could love him anyway. Have you ever loved someone dangerous? Someone you knew could destroy you? Comment below. Tell me I'm not crazy. I didn't answer Min-jae's calls. There were 17 of them over 3 days. Then they stopped. Instead, a package arrived. The second $15,000 check with a note in his handwriting. You earned this. The dinner was perfect. She was happy. No apology. No explanation. Just money. Like that could erase what I'd seen. I deposited the check and bought a plane ticket to Seoul. Marcus found me crying into my kimchi prep on Thursday. So you're really going? It's what I've always wanted. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Study with the masters. Learn the old techniques. This is my career. Right, your career. He handed me a clean towel. Has nothing to do with running away from the scary mobster you're in love with. I'm not. But the lie died on my tongue. I was in love with him. Catastrophically, stupidly in love with a man whose hands could fold dumplings and break bones with equal precision, who looked at his mother like she was his entire world, who'd watched me explain fermentation processes with the focus most people reserved for religious experiences, who lived in a world of violence I couldn't survive. My phone buzzed. Not Min-jae Sunjae. Please come say goodbye. Just once. For me. I shouldn't have gone. Should have stayed strong, kept my distance, protected what was left of my heart. But I'd never been good at denying Sunjae anything. The penthouse felt different in daylight, less intimidating, more lonely. Sunjae met me at the elevator, her face drawn with worry. He won't eat, she said without preamble. Won't sleep, just sits in that kitchen and stares at nothing. Sunjae, I can't. I'm not asking you to stay. Her voice was firm. I'm asking you to tell him goodbye. He deserves that much. She was right. I hated that she was right. Min-jae sat at the counter where we'd spent 6 weeks building something fragile and impossible. He wore gray sweatpants and a t-shirt the first time I'd seen him in anything but black. He looked wrecked, destroyed. He looked up when I entered, and the hope that flashed across his face nearly broke me. Juliet, I'm leaving on Saturday, I said, keeping my distance. I wanted to tell you in person. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected this. Seoul, the fermentation research. You knew? I know everything, remember? His smile was bitter. I'm glad. You'll be extraordinary there. The words I needed to say caught in my throat. I love you. I'm terrified. I can't live in your world, but I can't imagine living without you. Instead, I said, your mother told me something once. That honor isn't about power, it's about protecting what you love. Min-jae's jaw tightened. You can't protect me by being what you are, I whispered. And I can't love you by pretending I didn't see it. I turned toward the elevator before I could change my mind. Juliet. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The elevator doors closed on his broken expression, and I let myself cry all 47 floors down. Min-jae sat in the dark penthouse for 2 days after Juliet left. He didn't take calls. Didn't answer his lieutenant's increasingly frantic messages. Just replayed the violence over and over, the way her face had changed when she saw what he really was. The monster his father had built. The thing that destroyed everything soft. On the 3rd morning, his mother walked into his bedroom and slapped him. The sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Min-jae's head snapped to the side, more from shock than force. Sunjae had never raised a hand to him. Not once in 34 years. She slapped him again. Do you know what your father's greatest failure was? Her voice shook with fury. It wasn't the violence. It wasn't the empire. It was teaching you that you deserve nothing good. Min-jae stared at her, his cheek burning. That girl, Sunjae's voice broke. That beautiful girl brought light into this tomb. She made you laugh, made you hope. And you're going to let her walk away because you think your bloody hands disqualify you from happiness? She saw what I am. She saw you protecting your family. Sunjae grabbed his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. She saw you being exactly what a man should be. And then she saw you decide you weren't worthy of her. That's what scared her. Not the violence, the fact that you believed you deserved to be alone. The words hit harder than any punch Min-jae had ever taken. I can't leave the business. The organization. The organization? Sunjae laughed, harsh and bitter. You think I don't know? Your father built an empire on fear and blood, and you've spent 15 years maintaining it out of duty, out of Han. She used the Korean word for the weight of inherited sorrow. When does it end, Min-jae? When do you get to live? If I walk away, they'll come after us. Then end it. Her voice turned to steel. You're not a king without her, you're just a thug. A lonely, miserable thug watching life happen through bulletproof glass. Min-jae felt something crack open in his chest. She's leaving Saturday. That's 3 days. Then you have 3 days to dismantle an empire. Sunjae straightened, regal despite her grief. Your father taught you how to build power. I'm teaching you how to let it go. She walked to the door, then paused. That girl learned Korean to find her roots. Spent years studying food from a country she's never seen because she was searching for home. Sunjae's eyes glistened. You think she went to Korea for research? She went because her home was here, and it terrified her. After she left, Min-jae sat in the silence for exactly 3 minutes. Then he picked up his phone and made the call that would destroy everything his father built. Assemble the council, he said in Korean. I'm cashing out. I was going through airport security when I saw him. Min-jae stood past the checkpoint, somehow already through because men like him didn't wait in TSA lines. He wore jeans and a simple black Henley, a leather duffel slung over his shoulder. He looked nothing like the crime boss who'd terrified me, and everything like the man who'd learned to fold dumplings with gentle hands. My heart stopped. You can't be here, I said when I reached him, my voice shaking. I have to board in 30 minutes. I know. He held up his phone, showing me a boarding pass. So do I. I stared at the screen. Seoul Incheon. Same flight. Seat 3B to my 3A. What are you doing? Coming with you. He said it like it was simple. Like he hadn't just upended his entire existence. Min-jae, you can't just your business, your mother, everything. My mother is on a plane to my cousin's house in Vancouver, with $10 million and strict instructions to live her life. His voice was steady, certain. My business is dissolved, assets liquidated, territory handed over to people who won't start wars over it. The airport noise faded to white static. You disbanded the syndicate? Sold it, technically, for enough money to never work again. He stepped closer, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. I spent 72 hours making sure every loose end was tied, every enemy paid off or warned, every person who worked for me set up with severance or new positions. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Because my mother slapped me and told me I was choosing duty over life. Because for 6 weeks, I got to be someone different in that kitchen, someone who made things instead of destroying them. His hand came up slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, he cupped my face with impossible gentleness. Because I'm in love with you, Juliet Jones. And I'd rather be nobody in Korea with you than a king in New York without you. Tears blurred my vision. I'm scared. Of me? Of how much I want this. I grabbed his wrist, holding his hand against my cheek. Of building a life with you, and then having violence tear it apart. Of not being enough to make you stay away from that world. That world doesn't exist anymore. I made sure of it. His thumb brushed away my tears. I'm just a man with a very specific set of cooking skills and terrible Korean pronunciation, who happens to be obsessively in love with a culinary genius. Your pronunciation isn't that bad, I said through tears and laughter. Juliet. He leaned his forehead against mine. Come to Korea with me. Study fermentation. Teach me royal court cuisine. Let me spend the rest of my life learning how to be worthy of you. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. I kissed him. Right there in JFK, with my hands in his hair and his arms around my waist, tasting like salt and hope and new beginnings. Okay, I whispered against his lips. Let's go home. 5 years later, Jeju Island. The restaurant didn't have a name. Locals called it the quiet place, or where the American girl cooks, and that was enough. We sat on a cliff overlooking the black volcanic beaches of Jeju, a small Hanok-style building with 8 tables and a kitchen you could see from every seat. I woke before dawn, the way I always did, to start the fermentation checks. Min Jae's arm tightened around my waist. 5 more minutes, he mumbled in Korean, his accent still charmingly imperfect after all this time. The doenjang won't check itself. The doenjang can wait. He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. Your husband cannot. I smiled at the word. Husband. We'd married quietly 2 years ago in a temple in the mountains, with Sunjae crying happy tears and a handful of friends who'd never known our old lives. By the time I made it to the kitchen, Min Jae was already there barefoot in linen pants and a white t-shirt that had seen better days, chopping radishes with the precision I'd taught him. His hands moved confidently now, the same hands that had once only known violence. You're getting better at the matchsticks, I said, checking his work. Only took 5 years. He grinned, and I still wasn't used to how that expression transformed his face. Made him look young, free. The morning prep was our meditation. Me checking the 40 different fermentation crocks that lined the back wall. Him preparing the vegetables and banchan that would accompany lunch service. Moving around each other in the comfortable silence of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Sunjae arrived at 9, as she did 3 times a week, letting herself in with her own key. She'd moved to Jeju permanently last year, claiming the salt air was good for her skin. Really, she just wanted to be near us. Near the grandchildren she insisted were coming, any day now. The kimchi is too sour again, she announced, tasting from the newest batch. It's meant to be aged, Umani, I protested. Aged, not aggressive. But she was smiling, already moving to adjust the seasoning with the authority of someone who'd reclaimed her joy. I watched them, Min Jae and Sun Jae, arguing playfully over the proper water ratio for myeokguk, and felt something settle in my chest. This quiet life we'd built from the ashes of his empire. This small restaurant where we fed people food that tasted like memory and home. Min Jae looked up, caught me watching, and his expression softened into something that still made my breath catch. Come here, he said quietly. I crossed to him, and he pulled me against his chest, resting his chin on my head. Happy? He asked. I looked around the kitchen at the crocks of fermenting vegetables, at Sunjae humming while she worked, at the ocean visible through the window, at the life we'd chosen over power and fear. Home, I corrected. And for the first time in both our lives, we finally were. We traded an empire for 8 tables and fermenting crocks. He chose me over power. I chose him over safety. What would you burn down to finally go home? What empire are you maintaining that's keeping you from the life you actually want? Tell me in the comments. What are you ready to walk away from? Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.